Oh, someone from Wisconsin. I'm based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I know lots of folks are joining from around here, but we also have folks from around the country. That's awesome. Oh, hi, Victoria. Awesome. Okay, so, hi, Jody. Awesome. I'm excited to welcome you all to this workshop today. You signed up for to learn how to fundraise smarter, not harder, and how to identify high-value fundraising tasks. So why am I hosting this webinar? The reason I'm doing this is because I used to be an executive director without fundraising staff. And not only without fundraising staff, I used to be the only and first staff member. So that was a tough spot to be in. And honestly, sorry, I'm still admitting people to this webinar. So I used to be the only and first staff member, and I struggled a lot with staying on course. And I joke that I know every productivity hack under the sun, every strategy, and you can test me on that, really. If you feel like there's this productivity thing that really helps you, I will know about it. I'm 100% sure, because I always try to do more, and that's why I was so much into productivity. But what I learned is you need to know what to do rather than how to do more. You know, focus on the right things rather than doing more things. And that's why it's now my personal mission or my theory of change is, if we have more effective executive directors who raise more money, we can create massive change in this world, right? So that's why I help executive directors. That's why I love working with executive directors. And that doesn't mean that you're not welcome. If you're not an executive director, everyone is welcome. But that's always the lens through which I see this whole nonprofit world, right? An executive director with little support and very little overhead. So that's how I approach everything. And that's why I know that focusing on the right thing rather than more things, or how to do more things, is the thing that we need to do. Yeah. And in my mind, there are three aspects to that: strategy, relationships, and operations. And today we are going to mainly discuss strategy, a bit of operations, and of course, relationships are always at play in fundraising, but that I don't want to overwhelm you with, you know, all the theory behind it all. And just get started with today's topic. So today's topic and goal for today for you all is to start building a fundraising compass for yourself. So why a compass, right? A compass is a good analogy because a compass gives us direction, and a compass also helps us make decisions. Right? If we know where we want to go, if we know where north is, we can make easy decisions on which route to take. So if we want to go to San Diego, we know we can't go north, we need to go more like southwest. And if we come to a crossroad, then we know, you know, if we have a compass, we know which route to take. And that's what I want for you today, to have this sort of compass that will help you make better decisions on what to prioritize and what to focus on. How are we going to do this? 4 parts to this workshop. First of all, we'll discuss what gets into the way of focusing on what truly matters, what gets into the way of identifying what truly matters. We will then move on to what's the solution. So what can we do if it's so hard to identify what really matters? And then I will provide you with this framework that I've been talking about, right? It's I like to say it's a simple yet not easy framework that you can apply in your work. And then we'll also practice applying this framework in this session with you all. And we still have folks joining. So hi, everyone. If you joined late, great to see you all. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I'm just running through the agenda. And with that being said, let's get started with what gets into the way of focusing on the right things in fundraising. Oh, no, let me first do a poll. Why are you here? I'm very curious. All right, so you have 3 options. One reason why you might be here is that you feel you're fighting fires all the time. So to be honest, I think that's what I felt a lot when I was an executive director. I felt like things were blowing up around me, and I was, the one handling it all. Then a second problem could be, or the second reason why you might be here is that you're unable to stick to your priorities, although you technically know what you need to do, but there are, again, lots of fires cropping up everywhere. Or finally, the last option why you might have decided to sign up is that you have too many priorities, right? I mean, how do you even know? I mean, you need to focus on your major donors. There is maybe a capital campaign on the horizon. You should really, really think about getting a new CRM because the old one really doesn't work. So these are all very important tasks, but how do you differentiate and decide which one to tackle first? So I love seeing the results coming in. We have 80% of participants have answered so far. Let's give it one more minute. Okay, so I'm gonna end this poll. So what we see is, I hope you can see this. Let me know if you cannot see it. Thank you, Larry. I can see your face. So most of you say, I just have too many priorities, and totally understand that's normal. Second in place is I am fighting fires all the time. Nonprofit has very little overhead, right? We have an overhead problem. So of course, we all wear multiple hats and are responsible for a lot of things which are probably not in our job description. So feeling like a firefighter is definitely a thing that I have seen in my work with executive directors, but also myself. And then finally, I'm unable to stick to my priorities. No shame. Again, if lots of things are going on, and maybe if you're not an expert yet on fundraising, that is totally understandable. Okay, so let's get ahead with our first point on the agenda, with what gets into the way of prioritizing. Amy, Kim, okay. In prioritizing your most important fundraising tasks, or identifying them in the first place. So something that I see all the time in my work with executive directors, and again also with myself, is I just need to get through this really busy stretch, and then it will get better. But the reality is there is always one more gala. There will always be, you might think in the next fiscal year. It's just 1 month until the fiscal year. It's May, exactly 1 month until the end of the fiscal year for many organizations. After that, we can take a breather. It's just, the busy stretch of the end of the year. Or you might say, after we hire this new executive assistant, we might finally are able to, offload some tasks that clutter our desk and be able to focus on what truly matters. We can see the sun in the horizon. There are just these clouds. And once the clouds are gone, then we will be able to focus on what truly matters. But the reality is, as I mentioned before, and as we all know, it just will never get better. There's always a new fire. There's always, someone else who quits. Turnover is big, right? Especially these days. New recession, a new format, or the rollout of the CRM system. There will always be more. So that's problem number one. Then problem number two is, it's my job to put out fires. Again, totally understandable, because in the nonprofit sector, again, it goes back to the overhead myth, right? Or that we have too little overhead, that we all wear multiple hats. And therefore, we take on jobs that are not in our job description. And of course, as executive directors, as leaders, as supervisors, as managers, we expect a lot of our staff, and therefore we want to also lead by example. So if the printer breaks, you might be quick to jump in and say, let me help you with that. If you think it might only take me 5 minutes, I mean, it's a nice gesture, right? So let me help you with that. And the reality it is, then it might take an hour, and at the end you return to your desk, you feel a little tired, and you think, okay, I should have probably just told John to just call support, like the tech support of that printer company or whatever. But you wanted to be helpful, and that is also why we are in this world in the first place, right? Because I suppose most of us got into here because we had a tiny bit of helper syndrome, and wanted to do something good in the world, and that plays out not only on the macro level on what careers we choose, but also in the micro level of how we show up on a day-to-day basis, and that we really want to help our staff. So problem is only if you put out all the fires, you cannot focus on what truly matters, right? Okay. The third problem is listening to people who have no idea. And usually I don't use strong language like this, but it's just something that I see quite a bit, especially in board meetings. Nothing against board members. Board members are amazing. They have their role to play, and there are amazing board members. I'm serving on boards myself. I try to do my best. We all try to do our best, but board members, for the most part, in most organizations that I've worked with, don't have a nonprofit background, and they don't know anything about fundraising, but they're very passionate about this work. And they might have picked up about ideas or something that their friend, that really works very well for their friend who also works for a nonprofit, or they saw something in the news, and then they come up with all these ideas. And please tell me, put in the chat, like some ideas that your board members have thrown around, how you should raise money. That could be, a new event format. Return on investment, takes a lot of time and effort to put on a new event. Return on investment is typically very low. However, I see board members being drawn to this idea of hosting a new event concept as the potential solution to a fundraising windfall. And of course, that's difficult to, to then stop or slow down and say, we might have to, we need to focus on relationships. Fundraising is, a lot of the success in fundraising really happens under the surface of what you can see. So what you can see is raffles, galas, big checks, right? But the success in fundraising is really under the surface level, which you cannot see. And therefore, board members, especially, or anyone who is not in fundraising or in nonprofit, typically does not really understand how fundraising works. And because of the power dynamic, it is, however, really difficult to say no and say, okay, look, this is a long game. There is no shortcut to fundraising success. And that's what we need to focus on. It can be hard to, to say, okay, let's take a step back and really make a good strategic plan of how we want to pursue fundraising. Okay. So these are all the challenges that we are faced. And the consequence is we overwork ourselves. And the consequence, if we don't focus on what is truly important, if we don't prioritize those high value fundraising tasks, we will eternally be in this hamster wheel. We might fail to even achieve our goals. Not only our goals, but fulfill the expectation in our role to lead our organizations to financial sustainability. And if we don't raise enough funds, of course, we cannot fulfill our missions. So we leave behind those that we set out to serve, and obviously that is not helping anyone. So that's why it's so important to know what to focus on. All right, so far, so good. So the solution. That's, of course, what you all came here for, right?
Hello.
So let's look at this metaphor, or visual metaphor.
Hello.
You can see a jar. You can see rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. And now let's imagine that the jar are the constraints, that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. These are your financial resources, your time limitations, and the rocks, pebbles, sand, and water are your tasks and your activities that you need to do. And they all need to fit into this jar. So question for you, and you can come off mute, you can put the answer in the chat. Question for you is, how can we fit all of these things in? What do we need to do if we want to fit the maximum of these items in? The rocks, the pebbles, the sand, and the water. How do we need to go about it?
I think the first thing you put in are the big
Naifala
rocks.
says mix it. Inna says water first.
I think you put in the big rocks
Julie
first.
says Julie says start big and let the smaller things fill in space. Kim says rocks on the bottom first. Oh, Kim is with the Boston Debate League. We better not debate with her. Okay, sorry. Giovanni says big rocks first. Okay, great. So some of you had the right hunch, right? So what actually happens if we don't start with the rocks first? That's a visual image, an actual picture of what happens if you don't start with the rocks. You will not be able to fit in the rocks. You will, you fill in the water, then the sand, and probably at this point the water will already overflow. Put the pebbles and the rocks, rocks don't even fit in there. However, if you start with the rocks first, then the pebbles will find their way between the rocks. You then fill in the sand will find its way in between the different, in the remaining gaps. And then you can pour the water, and the water again will find its way to fill the remaining gaps. So the goal for today is for you to have a strategy, have a framework that allows you to prioritize those big tasks, the rocks, in this metaphor, right? Okay, it's all about prioritization. Again, coming back to what I said earlier, I was under the impression that, I just need to work harder or just become more efficient at what I do, but not more effective. So it's all about being effective, and effectivity means we need to be laser focused on what matters and prioritize those tasks. And that's not easy. Again, it might be simple. This is a simple metaphor, right? But it is not easy, which is probably why so many of you showed up today. And I'm actually really impressed with how many showed up. Thank you for being here. All right. So how to go from here? I want to know. So we all know, and I got some really great questions submitted, and many of you also said in the earlier poll. So it's not that I don't know what to do. It's more that I can't decide between the high priority tasks, between all those tasks on my on my task list, that I just don't know how to decide between all of those. And that's what I hear a lot in my work with executive directors. So now I want to know from you, what challenges do you experience in setting priorities? Oh, so let me go back. Exactly. So next poll. Here you go. So what are the challenges that you experience in prioritizing? So distinguishing between high and low value tasks. Is it that you're unable or don't quite know how to delegate or automate lower value tasks? Or is it that you just have lots of problems with time management, prioritizing those rocks and how to exactly do that? And again, that's totally normal. That's why we are all here. That's why this webinar was pretty popular between all the webinars that I hosted so far, because, it's not easy. Okay, so 50% of you have responded. Okay, we have We have a comment in the chat. Exactly, yeah. So Kim says there is an issue of being in a small org and not having folks to whom you can delegate, and we'll talk about this. Yeah, dealing with urgent tasks that keep coming up inevitably and not having the personnel to delegate these tasks to, similar to what Kim said and Jenna emphasized. Okay, agrees with Kim. Andrea agrees with Great. And Andrea, you're also the only full-time employee. Again, I've been in that role. So great, you made it here. Okay, so let's end the poll and share the results. So what we can see is delegating or automating lower value tasks seems to be the biggest issue. The second biggest issue is time management. And the third biggest issue with 30% of answers is distinguishing between high and low value tasks. Okay, so most of you are here because they want to understand how they can delegate and automate lower value tasks. And lots of you are also here because they want to get better at time management. Okay, so I stopped sharing the poll. So let's move on. Welcome to the most important piece of this workshop, the framework. Let's start with an imaginary fundraising to-do list. Let's imagine these are all the things that are on your to-do list. I'll go through them one by one. You need to find vendors for a gala. Again, all with the perspective. You're an executive director. You don't necessarily have fundraising staff or no staff at all. So this might end up on your plate, or you feel it is on your plate. Finding vendors for your gala. Catering last year wasn't so great, so you need to find a new vendor. Corporate sponsor presentation. You have a presentation with a corporate sponsor, great opportunity. You need to prepare this corporate sponsor presentation. Then one of your funders came back, one of your foundation funders came back and said they want an edit to your grant budget. Okay, fine. You have at the back of your head, our CRM is really not working well. We really want to switch. So we need to discuss with our staff, or we have made the switch and we want to roll it out. Then you also have this, you think, if I want to build capacity, I need to train my volunteers on sponsor outreach. So if they can do some of that, maybe that will offload things from my plate. I need to create graphics for our annual appeal. The storage is in a huge mess. Our gala is coming up, so we need to clean up that as well. And we have discussed a major donor strategy for a long time, but we just didn't have the time to get to it so far. So that's definitely also on the to-do list. This could be, a 2, 3, whatever, imagine the time span. But these are all the things that are kind of in your head about fundraising. So question is, how do we prioritize these? And here is where I want to present you your fundraising compass. So it's simple, not easy. We differentiate, as we said in the metaphor earlier, between water, sand, pebbles, and rocks. So water could be routine tasks. So think about cleaning up the storage, for example, or adding someone to your donor database. That is a routine task. It has very low value. So that's what you should do last. Then support tasks. What are support tasks? Here we can think of social media. It's something that needs to be done. It's something that can easily be outsourced. So one way to differentiate between routine and support tasks could also be routine tasks can be done by anyone. So they can be done by volunteers and, someone who has absolutely no background in any sort of, or vocational training whatsoever, who has no idea about your organization and your field of work. Support tasks require a little more skill. Let's say bookkeeping or social media. You know, you need to roughly know, you know, anyone can create a social media post, but it's about effective social media posts, right? So that would be, that requires a little more skill. So this is sand. Then executive tasks. These are the pebbles, basically. These are important tasks, and these should represent about 70% of the things that you need to do. And that now really depends on what sort of role you have and what sort of staff support you have. So let's say for an executive director without fundraising staff, that could mean writing a grant proposal. With fundraising staff, that could be check in and discuss the progress in your grant submission strategy with the grants manager. So this is the, you know, this is what your role is all about. These are the tasks that should be on your plate and that should make up about 70 to 80% of your time. You just execute on these tasks. However, if you only ever execute, there is one big piece missing. And these are the high leverage tasks. These are tasks or activities that will move the needle and that will make so the way I think about them is tasks or activities that will make everything else easier. So think strategy, analysis, evaluations, making big plans, changing things, testing things could be in there. So, and that's the main difference, right? And the tricky part is that it is very easy to get caught up in the routine and support tasks because they feel like quick fixes, right? Then the executive tasks, you just know, I need to do them. I mean, there's no way around, let's say, a grant report. If you don't have a grants manager, you need to, you know, you just need to fill the grant report. There's no way around it. But the high leverage tasks, these are the tasks that you have to actively schedule and prioritize. And this is incredibly hard, yet incredibly important because, again, it's all about leverage. And if you noticed something, my business is called Fundraising Levers because I want you to focus on these high leverage tasks. And that's also what I do in my work. I help you with these high leverage tasks that make everything easier. You know, again, a major donor strategy. So an executive task. Oh, wait, I have lots of examples for you because I felt, you know, again, it's simple, not easy. I have lots of examples for you to emphasize that. So routine task, sending acknowledgement letters. Here we talk about automation, right? So if you don't work with a CRM system that automatically does that for you, that's a problem, right? I have one client, they don't work with a CRM system right now. So they send acknowledgement letters. There's one staff member who is sending acknowledgement letters by hand, right? So that keeps you stuck in, you know, in these low value tasks. Proofreading fundraising materials. So, you know, you could put that all into Grammarly and just, you know, get it done rather than sitting down thinking, oh, is this right? And then Googling for, you know, do you say it like this or like that? And then add a user to a donor database. That's an example I gave earlier. So these are routine tasks. Ideally, delegate, delete. Sometimes it's just deleting. Okay, the fundraising material is good enough. We don't need to proofread it. It's good enough. If there's a typo, it's not going to influence whether someone makes a donation or not. Routine task, support task, pull a report from the donor database. So, you know, again, it requires a little more skill. A staff member could do that. They need to know how to operate in a fundraising platform. Creating a Facebook fundraiser. Again, someone needs a little bit of skill, has worked with Facebook before, and what I mentioned earlier, scheduling social media content. And then executive tasks. Again, that depends a little bit what sort of role you have, but these are the tasks that you are paid for, basically. You know, that's what you are hired for. As an executive director, you need to ask that major donor for a gift. It's just your job. You need to call a funder I'm thinking of a grant maker, of a family foundation, to find out about their priorities and to understand whether your grant proposal fits within their priorities. And it's also your job to develop a fundraising plan every single year. It's a routine task. It's on your desk. You need to do it. And then there are these high leverage tasks. And that's it. It is very important that you learn how to distinguish between them. And again, intentionally schedule them. So if your problem is, as we heard earlier, that you have a problem with delegation and automation, this could be a 10K, this could be a high leverage task for you, or a rock. It could be thinking about ways how you can automate more of these routine and support tasks. Who can you train? Who can you hire to do this for you? Other examples could be develop a capital campaign. A capital campaign has potential, actually my former employer where I used to work in nonprofit, they're going through a capital campaign. And I recently talked to their grants manager. This opened up lots of opportunities for them, right? They were not there before. So it puts the organization on a whole different level. It accelerates fundraising in the long run. So this is a high leverage task. It makes everything easier because a capital campaign will create lots of visibility for you. It will open doors. So that's leverage, right? Then create a planned giving program. You get one donor who writes you in their will, and you might have a $5 million estate gift in 3 years from now. That is leverage. Suddenly you have a $5 million gift. I shouldn't get too much into stories, but there are so many great stories that I know. Or discussing a give-get policy with the board chair, or thinking about ways you could convince your board chair to buy into this idea of a give-get policy. Because if you have everyone realize on your board, realize and buy into the idea that we are active in fundraising and we are giving out of our personal funds, that is leverage, right? So suddenly you have one fix and lots of benefits from that. However, as we said earlier, right? You remember what I said about, all the obstacles that you have to overcome. It is not easy to focus on these high leverage tasks because, again, there are fires. You have very little overhead. You want to lead by example. You want to, you don't want to be the person, that executive director who just sits at their desk and tells everyone what to do. You are, and also you're passionate about the mission, right? You want to be out there on the front line. But again, the risk is burnout. And that's why we need to be very clear on what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. Okay, so I have talked a lot. So what I want you to do now is to apply this framework. And I have a fun Jamboard activity. I hope most of you have worked with Jamboard, because I was planning not to walk you through that because I think it's pretty straightforward. This is the Jamboard link. I just put it into the chat. And what you will see, I see people joining. Okay, so the link works, great. What you will see is a stack of these fundraising tasks that we talked about earlier, right? And what I would like you to do is organize these, you're already doing it, right? Organize these in the right categories to help you practice that. And I need to open my windows. It's getting a little hot in here. I see lots of activity on the Jamboard. Okay. It seems there's some indecision. Of course, there are not a lot of these sticky notes. So you might be competing for the same sticky note and have different opinions. Okay, so it seems to slow down a little bit. So I would love to hear from you. Oh yeah, here, categorize the tasks on the Jamboard. These are the tasks that I put on sticky notes in the Jamboard. And I would love to hear from you. Was that easy? Did you have any questions? Why was it easy? Why wasn't it easy? You can come off mute. You can put questions in the chat. Someone is asking about the recording. Yes, the recording is going to be available. Okay. So, any opinions, or, did you feel very passionate about one of your Jamboard, one of your sticky notes, and someone was trying to put them in a different bucket than you would have put it? Okay, given the rearranging, I would say each of these tasks to some extent vary based on your organization, right? So that is definitely possible. As I said, I mean, this is a compass for you. So what I want to help you is to empower you to create that sort of categorization for yourselves, right? So Giovanni says the major donor strategy should be an executive task, right? So let me go through these actually. So major donor strategy. So the way I would think about this. So let's start at the top left, water. Let's start at the top left. So design graphics so what we have in there right now is cleanup storage. I think that's what we can all agree on. And then design graphics for appeal is also in there. Someone just moved it over to sand, and I would agree with that. You do need a little bit of skill if you need to design graphics. Not anyone. I mean, it's something, that needs a little bit of skill. And on the other hand, actually, if you want to argue with me, you could say, look, it's not absolutely necessary to have a graphic in your annual appeal. So in case of doubt, if we don't have any time to create a graphic, then this should be a water task or a low value task, right? We send the appeal without a graphic. So that's perfectly fine. However, and here we're coming to the comment that someone made earlier, it kind of depends a bit on your organization. If you are at 10, or let's say it's not, budget isn't always the right way to think about things, but let's say if you are a large organization and have sent out really visually appealing appeals in the past, then it would make sense to stick with the theme and comply with the donor expectations. So it could be either way, as someone mentioned earlier, depending on the size of your organization, but it should not be in your bucket or in your range of activities as the executive director. Okay, then train volunteers on sponsor outreach. So I would put this task in the ROC section, because this is leverage, right? So you do one training, and then you have an army of volunteers who know what to do, who know how to identify a sponsor, who know how to approach a sponsor. You will give them the materials that they need, and then they can run on their own. And all you have to do is check in every so often and see what's the status. You give them a tracker, and they run on their own. You appoint a leader who leads this effort. And I want to tell you, people always think volunteers are, great, but they can't do important fundraising tasks. They can. I have been on an advisory board. Exactly. What we did on this advisory board, it was a small organization. We wrote grants. The executive director did not have any time, and it was not part of their fundraising strategy so far to write grants. But what we did is we created a grant committee, and we researched, wrote, and submitted grants in collaboration with the executive director, but we did it for her. I just want to mention that volunteers can be a great resource, and a high leverage activity is train those volunteers and really be serious about that, especially if you have very little resources to hire. That was another concern, right? We don't have the staff capacity to do things. Go work with volunteers, find really good volunteers. It is possible. Okay, find vendors for direct mail, find vendors for your gala, whatever. Someone actually made that up. That's great. Find vendors for your direct mail. Yes, I mean, it's something that you could do, that you should do every so often, I guess, if you want to save money. It's not a high leverage task. It's not something that should be on your desk as an executive director. There are many more important things. So if you have to decide between, if you don't have fundraising staff, you have to decide between writing a grant proposal for a potential 50K grant and finding a vendor for your direct mail appeal that will save you a few $100. I think the answer is pretty clear, right? This is a sand activity. Someone is just adding researching grant opportunities. Depending on, whether you're the executive director without staff, I would say if you're an executive director without staff, researching grant opportunities can be on your desk. It can be your job, right? Because who else could do it? Unless you train your volunteers, which would be a leverage task. So then edit the grant budget. Yes, if you don't have fundraising staff, of course, it's on your desk. If you have staff that manages grants, then it's not on your desk. Then it's a sand activity, or that you need to delegate or outsource. You can hire a grant writer, right? That might be a very good return on investment. One of my clients, the organization is growing exponentially. They rely heavily on government funding. And one of the things that we recently did was that I connected them with a grant writer, because the executive director was overly focused on writing grants, and that was not a good use of his time in this phase of his development, in the development of his organization. So we outsourced that. And that's a good return on investment, right? So you don't have to necessarily hire someone. You can also just, find someone with a very, if you have a small budget, the payoff, ideally, if you find a good grant writer, is worth it to contract someone to do these tasks. So you sometimes need to be creative on how you can free up your desk to focus more on the pebbles and more on the rocks. So discuss rollout of a new CRM. So rollout, I think that's, I intentionally said rollout, because rollout means you already decided on the CRM. So I would say it's not a high leverage thing. It's just, planning the rollout. It can be on your desk. It can also be on the desk of a staff member if you have someone. So at an organization I worked at, we had our, what was her name, associate, make a plan. How do we roll this out? The decision on which CRM to go with was on the executive director's desk. But the rollout was not on his desk. The rollout was on the desk of staff. Okay. So I think, I hope you had a, you have a rough idea of how this works. I want to quickly check in the chat. Let me know if you have any questions. Giovanni, I lost audio, lost the sound. Everyone lost the sound. So, gotta know how to pay if no budget. this session has been brilliant. Okay. Hear more where to ID good contract. Okay, good contract grant writers. If you have any follow-up questions, reach out to me, obviously, after the webinar. Okay, cool. Okay, so Giovanni says I'm good. Okay, so everyone can hear. Awesome. So any questions? I think I asked earlier about questions. Now, so of course, this is almost a double-edged sword, right? So on the one hand, it is important to identify the high-value tasks, the high-leverage tasks, right? And know what to focus on and how to clear your desk from all these fires that crop up everywhere, so that you can focus on the things that you need to do, or the things that need to have leverage. So now I want to know, so what is your problem? And is the problem rather execution, or is the problem the strategy? Is the problem that you don't know what to do, or is the problem that you cannot do the things that you need to do? Okay. So the answers are still coming in. We are leaning slightly towards execution, that it's actually doing the things that you need to do. That seems to be the bigger problem. Okay, let's end the poll. So we see around 60% of you, so the majority has trouble in the execution, doing the things they need to do. And around 40% have trouble with the strategy. That means identifying what they need to do. So what I want to do next is send you all into breakout rooms to discuss one action step that you can take next week to improve prioritizing high leverage tasks, whether that is focusing on the execution or the strategy. What is one thing? And I really only want you to focus on one thing that you can do next week in order to make progress on that. And I want to throw you in breakout rooms. How many folks in a breakout room? We have 43 on this call. Some are leaving. Let's say 6. Okay, so 6 per breakout room. All right. So I'll give you 5 minutes, and you can discuss and hold yourselves or each other accountable. Maybe exchange with others and see what they have learned, what you have learned. So I'll throw you into breakout rooms. Okay. All right. I think everyone is back. Everyone should be back. Okay. All right. So I hope you made a few good connections in the breakout room. If you did, make sure to get someone's contact details. If you missed that, feel free to reach out to me. I can potentially make the connection afterwards. So I would love, or I invite you to set an intention and write in the chat and share with others what you are going to focus on next week. What is your one action step that you can take next week to improve prioritizing your high leverage tasks? Whether that is, saying, okay, I'm blocking my calendar Monday morning for 1 hour and I'm doing the thing. Commit yourself, write in the chat what you decided on. Any questions? We have a few minutes left. Just a few. All right. Yes, the recording will be available. Okay. Yeah, so if no one has questions, then I'll move on with the wrap up, right? So this is a simple framework. It is not easy. And again, this is your compass. This is your compass to raising the funds that you need to make sure that you're always on track. This is your compass that will guide you towards your fundraising goals. And in order to do so, you need to really focus and prioritize, schedule the time for high leverage tasks. So that's where approximately 20% of your time should be spent. Executive tasks, where you just do the thing that you're hired for, 70%. Support tasks, you can't avoid them, right? And this is not set in stone, obviously, but I would use this as a general guideline. Support tasks, 0 to 10% if you can. And routine tasks should really not appear on your desk at all in an ideal world. I know the nonprofit world is not always ideal. We make it work anyway. But having a compass can help you achieve your goals. Okay. So if you have questions, or if after this call, you're like, oh my God, I really don't understand this one thing, or can you help me figure out how to get more time on my calendar? Feel free to book a 15-minute call with me. I'm happy to talk with you through your issues or identify how it might look like if we work together, how I can help you make more time for those high leverage tasks, how I can help you take over those high leverage tasks. And if you need more resources, I also compiled a fundraising task priority list where I have a long list of tasks and I categorize them in the 4 different buckets for you, so that you can just, actually, that's literally what I have, not only for my work, but also for my personal life. I have a chart with low value tasks and high value tasks. So I have this literally for my personal life as well as for my work. So I use this framework all the time. Okay. Yeah, so book a call, get your fundraising task priority list, or connect with me on LinkedIn if we are not connected yet. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I hope to see you around, and let me know if you have any questions. Amy says, will you send the priority fundraising task priority list out? I actually put a link in the chat where you can get that list. I will also follow up with an email. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to close this or stop sharing and stop this webinar. Bye.